You are listening to Smart Women's Dating Podcast, episode number 80. Welcome to Smart Women's Dating Podcast. I am your host, certified life coach Lærke Nielsen, and I help smart, independent women attract the love they deeply desire without having to chase or settle. This podcast will give you the mindset tools and insights you need to finally crack the code to your love life. Are you ready? Then let's go. Welcome back. Today I want to talk about red flags and green flags because I think there's a bit of confusion around that. Some of you see red flags when it's not really a red flag, and some of you might see things as a green flag even if it doesn't mean anything about the guy's potential as a partner. So I want to just make one thing clear here. When I talk about red and green flags, I'm talking about a man's potential or capability of being a partner in a healthy relationship. Someone that is capable of forming a healthy relationship and that you can potentially share your life with on a longer term. And then, of course, in addition to that, you can have preferences. You can want a man who lives in the city and not on the countryside, or someone who likes to travel or do sports and so on. But that has really nothing to do with whether he's able to be in a long-term committed relationship or not. And when it comes to the preferences, you might want to really think about and be absolutely clear why you have them and if they're really important. A classical example is, of course, height. How tall is the guy? And some women want a man to be minimum 10 centimeters or 4 inches taller than themselves. And now you can ask, is that really that important? Or it could be the question about, can he be bald or not? What does it even say about a man if he's bald? It is typically not his own choice, right? It's not a reflection of his decision or a lifestyle choice, like for instance a tattoo would be. So your preferences are all very individual, but I want to invite you to really think about whether they are necessary, whether they are important, and why they are important. And then for this episode, I want you to just put your preferences aside for a moment and get really familiar with the red and green flags that tells you something about his potential as a partner. And I'm going to start with the red flags, and this is not in any particular order, and it's also not an exhaustive list. But I'm going to mention a lot, so if you want to integrate this in your dating life, you might want to find a pen and paper and take some notes so you got them all. We're going to start with the real red flags, the true red flags. And the first one is something that I think you all can agree with me on. And that is if the guy has some kind of drug abuse or some kind of addiction. That is a no-go. So he might have had that in the past and then gotten over it, but you want to make sure that it's a long time ago and that he really is over it and he's able to talk about it and can reflect on it in a mature way. Another one could be that he is not looking for a serious relationship. He might be very clearly looking for a casual, but he could also be unclear about what he's actually looking for. And then when you are looking for something serious, then it is a red flag to you that he isn't. And this is something I invite you to speak openly about with him. Just ask him straight up, what are you looking for? And if his answer is not very clear or he's kind of just going with the flow and trying to see how things develop and so on, it's a sign that he might not be looking for something serious. Another sign could also be that he's very physical on the first date. He's putting his hand on your thigh, he's putting your hand on your shoulder, he wants to kiss you. It doesn't necessarily have to be a red flag, but this could be a sign that he's more looking for something casual than something long-term where he wants to get to know you on a deeper level before it develops into something more physical. Another red flag is if you see him not being kind to others, because that will eventually also happen to you if that's the case. And this could be in the way he treats the waiter or other people that you meet when you are out on a date. That's a red flag. Another red flag is if he's got anger issues, if he's got a really bad temper or is out of control somehow, and you experience that. Even if you experience that towards someone else or in the way he talks about other people, you can sense whether he's got a temper that is a little bit difficult for himself to control. That is also a red flag because at some point it's going to point towards you. Another red flag is if he doesn't respect a boundary, if he doesn't respect when you say no to something and he starts to negotiate or try to convince you into dismissing your own boundaries. That is a clear red flag. You want to pay attention to that. And then another one is a little bit classical is if he speaks very negatively about his ex, or just the fact that he talks a lot about an ex early on. That's a red flag. You want to make sure that, first of all, there's enough distance between now and the time when the last relationship ended, and that he has processed all that, so his ex is not someone who's taking a lot of his attention, a lot of his thoughts at the moment. And also, ideally, he wouldn't speak negatively about any of his exes. At least he would speak about them in a more nuanced way and also be able to admit his own part of why a relationship didn't work out. So, talking about an ex as if she was a bitch or it was all her fault and it was so difficult and she was toxic and so on, that is kind of a red flag. If he's hot and cold or he doesn't communicate consistently, he's into you a lot and then you hear nothing from him for 2 weeks. That is mixed messages and it is often a sign that he's not actually really into you or he's just not ready for a mature relationship. He's not looking for that. He's more trying to get whatever he can get, but without actually investing and committing himself into the relationship. So that's, of course, a red flag. He says one thing and he does something else. He's not reliable. He says he wants to follow up and see you again, or he says, let's meet up in the weekend, and then you never hear from him before maybe a week later. And if that happens repeatedly, that's a red flag. It can also be that you have this experience that he can't really listen to you. He only talks about himself, and it feels like he isn't really engaging with you in conversations. He's just sitting there and waiting for when can I talk again, and he's not open to hearing what you have to say. And another red flag, he's trying to change you or he expects you to compromise for him. So he's kind of assuming that you agree on something, that you want the same, and then if you express that you don't want that, he wants you to still go ahead with his idea, or he wants you to agree with him. Another red flag is also to not be able to admit his mistakes or apologize for something. Now you can say when it's early on in dating, you didn't actually have any situation where he needs to apologize for something, but he could show that to you in the way he talks about different situations. At least he can show you the opposite. He can show you by talking about a situation, let's say at work, where he realized that he made a mistake and then he apologized, for instance. If he cannot at all see his own role in why a past relationship didn't work out, if it's all about his ex-partners, that it was all their fault, and that's also where they speak of themselves as a victim of circumstances. It's always other people's fault. It can be their ex, or it can be their manager, or it can be someone in their family, but it's never themselves. It's always someone else's fault. Big red flag. He is judging others, and he might also be judging you, maybe without saying anything, but he is judging others. He's very quick to make a judgment and categorize them in a certain box. That's a red flag. And if he's over 50 and had never had a long-term relationship of more than 2 years approximately, that is also a red flag. It's a bit strange. So if that's the case, you want to ask him a few questions about why that is and see how well reflected he is about that and how much self-awareness he's got about that. And so just some examples of fake red flags that are not really red flags. If he's 50 and he was never married, that is not a red flag. Some people don't actually have an ambition to get married. Some people just want to be in a relationship that can be just as committed, but without the paper and without the marriage. Another one that I heard recently is he's got kids with 2 different women. As long as you don't know the story about that, it is not a red flag. This guy could have been married or found his first partner in a very young age and got a child with this woman, and then he could be married to someone else later on. It could also be that he didn't actually know that she was pregnant and she left him. I had an example from my own past with a boyfriend I had whose ex-partner got pregnant one of the last times they were together, and then she broke up, left him, and 6 months later she knocked on his door and told him that she was pregnant. She wanted him to pay child support, but she also made it clear that she was not open to him seeing the child a lot. So that was, of course, a really difficult situation for him, because he wanted the child and he tried to convince her to come back, which she didn't want. And in the end, this is just something that can happen. It could also be that one of the women he has a child with actually died from cancer. You don't know the story, so him having had kids with 2 different women is not a red flag. He's been single for a long time. That is not in itself a red flag, and in some cases it might actually be a green flag. And that really depends on how he spent the time when he was single. If he spent the time on something useful, maybe he decided to be there for his kids after a difficult divorce. Maybe he wanted to work out some things in himself. He wanted to learn and grow, and he wanted to really get to know himself and get reconnected before starting all over again. So that really depends on what has been going on in his life and how does he speak about that time. What is his self-awareness? And another fake red flag is that he doesn't have a good relationship with his mom or his parents. Again, we do not know the story, and it could be that he grew up in a very dysfunctional family, and that is the reason why it's difficult for him to have a good relationship with his family. So that in itself is not a red flag. Now, what are then the things that can tell you that a guy might be worth getting to know better and that he could have some qualities that are really good for a long-term partner? I will walk you through the real or the true green flags to begin with. The first one, which might be something that you kind of misdiagnose or you overlook, many of you, but the first one is that he is excited about you. And he's excited about you on a consistent basis. Do not underestimate that. Many women allow themselves to be in a dating connection or in a situationship with someone who isn't actually showing that much excitement about her. Someone who's a bit cool and laid back, and then they mistakenly think that the guys who are excited about them, they might not be good partner potential, or they don't have enough interesting going on in their life, because why would they then want to pursue you? This is often also a reflection of both what you are used to in the past, what kind of men you are used to having connections with or relationships with, and also how you perceive your own value. What are your thoughts about a man who's excited about you? If you think there's something wrong with him for being excited about you, it could be a sign that you are not so excited about yourself. And if you've been with emotionally unavailable guys for years and years, then someone who's excited about you, that's gonna feel triggering and weird to your nervous system. So you have to get used to that. You have to sort of have an inner conversation about this actually being the ideal situation. Another true green flag is that he takes initiative and he prioritizes you. He wants to see you. He also wants you to meet his friends and family. He's not hiding you away. He's actually very proud to say, hey, I want you to meet this woman that I'm dating. And he listens and he remembers what you say. So you talk about something one day and then he follows up the next time you see him. And he also asks you good question about that. He shows you curiosity. He wants to get to know you on a deeper level. He asks you a lot of questions and he doesn't just shift the topic back to himself immediately. He stays in the conversation about you because he really wants to know more about you and what you think about different things in life. And he shows you clear signs that he cares about your well-being. It's important to him that you feel okay. And he wants to check in with you when he organizes a date, that it's okay with you, that you like this place. Is it okay to sit here at this table in the restaurant, and so on. And also ask you how you are doing. If he knows you went through a difficult time, or you had a long day at work, or you had a challenge at work, he's going to catch up with you and ask, hey, how did it go? He is reliable. He does what he says he would do, and that is a consistent pattern. And he also is someone who's willing to learn and grow. And this is something you can see in the way he talks about himself, his challenges in life, and sometimes also his past relationships, but at least the relationships he has with other people as well. He is authentic, and that means also that he's willing to be vulnerable. And that doesn't mean crying on the first date or something like that. Being vulnerable can also just be sharing something deeply personal, sharing a dream that he has, or sharing something that he really feels. Without this authenticity, without the willingness to be vulnerable, we can never create a really deep connection. And if someone is constantly hiding that, and if they don't want to be vulnerable with you, it means that they're not open to letting you in on a deeper level. They are not fully emotionally available. So another green flag is also that they're willing to see their own shortcomings and admit that there are things they're working on. So you hear a guy speaking about something he's not very good at and that he wants to learn, he wants to become better at, especially when it comes to the soft skills or the human competences. We're not talking about cooking a certain kind of food or something like that, but seeing that maybe it's difficult for him to see someone else get ahead of him in something at work, for instance, and that they want to be better at managing that and coping with that. That is such a big green flag. Someone who can admit that and has the awareness about that and is willing to share that. If he's got emotional intelligence, that's of course a green flag, but how can you know that? There are several different ways we can see that, but it could be he doesn't throw different things in your head that feels hurtful. He shows a minimum of empathy. He can sense when you are being vulnerable, and he doesn't cut you in your speak when you are talking, and especially not when you're talking about something personal. And the next one I really like, and I think is also a little bit underestimated, but that is the fact that he is generous. And we're not talking just generous in terms of paying for dinner or stuff like that. What I'm talking about here is being emotionally generous, being generous with his time and his compliments and his attention. So you're having a conversation, you are diving into a topic, he might want to ask you questions about you. He doesn't just sit on the tip of the chair and waits impatiently for him to be able to talk, but he stays in the moment and he listens to you. He gives you all the time and attention that you need. Especially if, let's say, you are going through a difficult time or you had a challenging experience and you're sharing that with him. He gives you the time. He's generous with the time and attention for you to be able to share that in a proper way. And you agree on values. You agree on values in life and what you want in your life, what kind of life you want to live. That is, of course, a really important green flag. And then finally, once you get to know him a little bit more, you will also find out if you can navigate a conflict without breaking up or without breaking down. Having a difficult conversation, solving a problem, and then moving on and let it go. That's a big green flag. Because the thing is, you will never be able to avoid conflicts, no matter how compatible you are, no matter how excited you are about each other, no matter how much you agree on values and lifestyle and goals and so on, at some point there's going to be a conflict. And it's not going to happen only once. It's going to happen several times again and again. It's one of the things we know for sure. And the point is not to avoid the conflicts. The point is to be able to navigate it in a healthy way. To be able to share each your point of views, to be able to listen even when it's very difficult to hear what the other person says, to be able to absorb that and to integrate that and to be considerate of how the other person perceives a situation, and then together find a solution that can work for both of you. That is the challenge here. So that's a really big green flag if you can see that this is working for you both together. So what are then some of the fake green flags? The green flags that are not actually green flags and that might confuse you, and it's a bit like something that glitters in front of your eyes but are not really gold. The guy is attractive, he's handsome, and he's very good at charming you, and he might wear some really fancy clothes. That's not a real green flag. This doesn't say anything about his potential as a long-term partner. The guy is rich, he's well off, he's got a high status, he's got a big house, and maybe he's got an expensive car. Not a green flag at all. It doesn't say anything about how good he is as a partner. And the same goes for whether he has great achievements, like for instance in his career. Of course, you want to be sure that you're at the same level. You want to be sure that you have something to talk about and you have at least some common background. And usually I would say if you have a long academic education and you work in something that's very intellectual, you want to find someone who has a bit the same. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they also have a long academic degree, but the fact that they also think the same way and they reflect to the same level, that's of course important. But does he have one or the other position or title? That doesn't actually predict anything about his ability as a partner. A fake green flag could also be he comes from a very nice harmonic family where the parents are still married. This is of course really nice if that's the case, but it does not say anything about his ability to create a healthy relationship. And whatever our parents do is not really within our control. If his parents are not married, it's like 50% of the population, right? So it's not a red flag if they're not married. It's not a green flag if they're married. What is important is what is his awareness around that and what are his values. And then another fake green flag is if he writes you good morning every single day. Of course, as I said in the beginning, it's a really big green flag if he shows that he's excited about you, but it doesn't really matter whether he writes you a message every day. You can show that in many different ways. And this little message every morning, it's not necessarily a sign that he can be a good long-term partner. So these were some important red and green flags and some that are misperceived as red and green flags. And I hope this helps you. And of course, I will be back again next week. And in the meantime, you can book a free consult call with me if you want to explore what it would be like to have me as your coach. And if you want to know more about the different options that I offer for you to work with me. The link is in the show notes and of course on my Instagram bio at Lærke the Love Coach. Have a wonderful week. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast and you want to get support from a coach on your love journey, I invite you to book a free consult call with me. You will find the link in the show notes. And also, don't forget to subscribe, and I would love it if you would rate and review this podcast, and then you'll also help other women find it.